Hi, I'm David Harmon, and this is my partner Keith Cook. We are real estate brokers with RE/MAX in Bellingham, Washington.
On our website, a lot of people were searching real estate terms, so this video specifically, this series will be for real estate glossary or lingo or terms that realtors or brokers are using in real estate. So hopefully you like it. We are brokers. The end result is what we're hoping for is that people like what we have to say. They want to list their property for sale or help them find a property to buy. So check it out, like, subscribe, and hope you enjoy.
Net operating income. The income that is capitalized to estimate the property's value, calculated by subtracting the property's operating expense, fixed expenses, variable expenses, and reserves for replacement from the effective gross income, also called net income.
Net operating income, or NOI, is traditionally used in valuing rental or income property. So at the end of the day, at the last, end of all of the bills, all the expenses is like, what do you net? And so if one property, nets at the end of the day $1,000 and another property nets at the end of the day $1,200, realistically, someone would be more willing to pay a higher amount for the higher income stream. So it's a good calculation. It's income property is different from personal residential property, or it's more feelings and emotions on and location where you want to live. If it's income property, the value is based on the income.
Nonconforming use, a property use that does not conform to current zoning requirements, but is allowed because the property was being used in that way before the present zoning ordinance was enacted. Dealing with this right now.
Yeah,
with a restaurant that's changed the zoning, but you can still run a restaurant there if you want.
We'll run into that quite a bit. Zoning does change, and there were properties that were constructed prior to the zoning, and so now that they're left after the fact, they're not going to say you have to conform to the zoning right now, but if the use is going to change, they're going to want the use to change back to the current zoning. So there's some areas, say they were residential, then it went to, say, light industrial, and you can have a residential use in a light industrial property. When I was just talking about yesterday, it was a house. They turned it into actually an office in the light industrial use, and now they want to go back to a house. They can't. Had they kept it as a house the whole time, they could have been able to do that. One disadvantage is rebuilding, and so your lender may have a say-so on this too. So say you have a 4-unit apartment in a residential zone property. If that was to have a catastrophe and need to be rebuilt, if there was a fire, earthquake, or something, you might have to go back down to the residential zoning and may not be able to put back in a 4-unit. So that is one drawback of having a non-conforming use property.
A non-possessory interest, an interest in property that does not include the right to possess and occupy the property, an encumbrance such as a lien or an easement.
There's a lot of different types of interest in property. So if you own it, then you own the property. But if I have a property and Dave has to drive over my property to get to his property, what he may have is an easement, so he'll have an interest in the property, but it's non-possessory. Or the same thing, if I've got a property and I owe Dave some money on it, Dave has a financial interest in the property, but not in possession of the property. I'll pay you back soon, Dave. Notarize, to have the signature on a legal document verified and certified by a notary public. A notary public is someone who is officially authorized to witness and certify the acknowledgments made by someone signing the legal document.
Yeah, normally we'll see this in real estate just as a clarification on who the actual person is, so they actually have to be identified by a notary public before they sign documents.
Sure. In Washington, usually what you have to do is someone has to go through a class and become a notary. They do a whole background check on them. They get that little seal or stamp, so when they stamp the paperwork, it says witnessed here in front of everybody. And those are a lot of times documents are recorded, so you want to have it, that's about making it as official as possible. It's almost like double official. It's notarized, it's official, it's recorded, it's even more official. In all sales and deeds, the seller is actually, when you buy a property, you want that signature notarized to make sure that that person can't come back later and say, that wasn't me. No, it was notarized and verified that you were the true person selling that. In our sales, usually the sellers need to be a lot more notarized than the buyers. So buyer signatures don't require as many notaries. Usually what's going to be notarized with the seller is the deed is the main one. But they're definitely a big part of what we do in real estate. We are seeing there's mobile notaries who can actually come to your house and sign you. You can usually have a notary at the title company. Banks will have notaries. We're just right now getting into online notaries. If you're not in the United States and selling properties and we need a notary, sometimes that's a challenge as far as dealing with other governments and trying to get the same type of a notary from another location. So it's definitely a big part of our world. We deal with notaries on every transaction we do. Notice of default. A notice sent by a secured creditor to a debtor informing the debtor that he or she has breached the loan agreement.
I don't think I want to get one of those in the mail.
No. And if you do, it's probably going to be notarized, and then there'll also be a Jane Doe Harmon and a Johnny Doe Harmon. And it's kind of the first step of the foreclosure process in Washington state. So we don't have a judicial or have to go to court process to foreclose property. So there's certain criteria that are in place, and the first one of them is the notice of default. You'll get other letters before you get a notice of default, but it's kind of the first official notice that you will receive. They're a lot of times they're recorded to make sure that they've made public notice. If you get one of these, call us, because there's different ways to try to resolve this. So that's kind of the last thing that you want to get is one of these letters. So something's happened, and things happen to everyone, but we can help you try to resolve this. But you're on the gun. You're imminent looking at a foreclosure unless you do something to adjust that. So it's good for the lender, because the lender, if I owe Dave some money and I stop paying him, Dave will go through the process and ultimately give me a notice of default. So that's going to put me on the clock on how much time I have to pay Dave back or deal with him somehow, negotiate with him.
Yeah, once again, putting your head in the sand is not the best option here. There's always workarounds for most everybody. And once again, we have the knowledge and foresight to be able to help you navigate through that issue. Nuisance, a use of property that is offensive or annoying to neighbors, landowners, or to the community.
And we actually have nuisance ordinances and actually rules that are out there. So Whatcom County has some addendums and requirements. So like say you're near a dairy farmer, sometimes it doesn't smell so good near the dairy farm. And so there's kind of overlays, or where you should understand that you're moving into an area that may have things that aren't pleasant. So a friend of mine thinks it smells like apple pie when they spray. I don't quite believe that, but that's a nuisance.
Each neighborhood, if you have HOAs, they can deal with some of this stuff a little bit differently than other things. So I think nuisance to one person is different than to another, but as far as real estate goes, there's definitely some rigid lines to what creates a nuisance.
You're spot on there. Everyone's different and everyone reacts to different situations differently. So it's something, I guess, that one party's not satisfied with, or at least the identification of something that some people may not be satisfied with. With the one with the farmer, I think he likes the smell of that because that probably does smell like money to the guy. I think everyone else except for the farmer, maybe not so much, but everyone has their own little interpretation of what that is. But it is a term, and people, in real estate, not everyone always likes what's going on near them. So the term, if you don't like what's going on there, something could be different, is a nuisance.
Offer. When one person, the offerer, proposes a contract to another, the offeree, if the offeree accepts the offer, a binding contract is formed, or meeting of the minds.
And an offer doesn't always mean it'll be accepted either. So in the market currently, you might expect to receive several offers on one property. Sometimes it may take a long time to get even one offer. So an offer is just, expressed in writing what one party's interest is to purchase a property. That's what we see in real estate. It's an offer. So there's a listing, and someone can make an offer. They can either meet the terms of what they're requesting, or they can ask for something different. Say they offer less, then that might be a less offer or a lowballer. Get a lowballer later, but if you offer way less, the term for an offer that is substantially less than what the initial ask price is, then brokers, I think, will refer to that as a lowballer.
Offsite improvements, improvements that add to the usefulness of a site but are not located directly on it, such as curbs, streetlights, and sidewalks.
And this is actually pretty big if you're going to develop raw land, because you have to look at what your off-site improvement requirements may be. So if you're developing property, you may need to widen the road, or bring in a bigger water main, or fire hydrants, or stormwater, or improve a traffic light that's 3 blocks away. So there's a lot of things that may come in, and when you're developing property, that may be considered off-site improvement. But so it's required to improve something that is not on the property that you own, but it does improve the general area and the accessibility and really the value of the property you're purchasing.
Yeah, we see this, definitely more like for people that are think they want to build a house or whatever, and they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. It's not just a simple little land deal. There's definitely a lot that goes into that process, like beyond what the average person might see initially. So those offsite improvements can definitely be a big budget breaker.
Sure, and just continue with this, if we were going to say on-site improvement definitions would be adding a well, so you have a water source, and bringing power from the lot to your site where you're going to build. Having a septic system would be an on-site. Having your stormwater set or rain garden. Having the property delineated, or having a wetland study if you wanted to have that. Those are improvements that would actually have, or even a survey, a report. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do physically to improve the value of real estate.
Open house, showing the listed home to the public for a specified period of time.
How do open houses work, Dave?
Well, basically, when we get a listing, the seller, we go through the house with the seller, we get all the details of the house, and then we get the opportunity to have an open house and share all that information to the general public. So we'll set up a specified period of time, maybe like 12 to 2, where we'll invite the public, buyers, whatever, to come over and view the property.
Open houses, I think, have been around my entire career, and there's public open houses and brokers open houses. The gist of it is that if there's a property that's for sale, it's made available either to brokers or to the public for usually a set period of time to come in and take a quick look. So it's a good use for some buyers who don't want to make appointments and look at a bunch of homes, or they're not sure which homes they want to look at. They'll drive around a neighborhood. There's often open houses on the weekends. It's beneficial for the brokers to sit the open houses, because they are showing the property for sale, which benefits the seller of the property. Where it benefits the broker is that they may run into someone who is either a neighbor and may want to sell their home too and be curious about that value, or show it to a buyer, and if this home doesn't work for them, then they are geared up to say, all right, well, there's a house around the corner, maybe this one would work better, or start a relationship with the new buyer. So all in all, open houses, I wouldn't say are the worst idea in the world. I don't think generally you're going to have selling a lot of properties from the open house. They would have, I believe, sold anyways without the open house, but it does condense or collapse time to get a bunch of people through a property at a certain amount of time. With COVID, we weren't actually able to do open houses as much. Now that COVID's relaxing, it's a little easier to let people into open houses. But all in all, it's a fair way to try to get a lot of people through. If it was so successful, I don't think brokers would have jobs or limited jobs if it was just as easy as have an open house and you're going to sell the house at the open house. So I guess it's understanding your expectations of what an open house is, and it's a real estate tool for gaining exposure on a home for sale.
Option to purchase, an option giving the optionee the right to buy property owned by the optionor at an agreed upon price during a specified period.
And this is probably the very next step up from renting, I would say. So if you're going to rent, there's no agreement between you and the landlord that you may purchase the property somewhere in the future. An option, you've kind of negotiated a purchase and sale agreement and a rental agreement all at once. And the terms of the sale and the lease will be in there, and the time frame. So you may have a rental agreement and the purchase and sale agreement, and at some point you can either exercise your option or not exercise your option as a borrower. I've had them before where they've been successful with sellers who are most likely willing to do an option if they were upside down. And so I haven't seen it as much lately, but in a down market, or the seller has less equity in the property and wants to sell it. So let's just say the property's worth 100, but they owe 120, and they're just impossible to sell it for 120 right now. If you do an option with a tenant, maybe you give them more time, 3, 4, 5 years, but you say, listen, you can buy it for 150, but you've got the next 5 years to pay for it. Where that works for the tenant is they got the right to buy the property. If it's worth 200 down the road, that's the tenant's $50,000. The benefit for the seller is they've had someone in there making the payments, they didn't go through foreclosure, they're still getting 150 versus the 100. So it can really be a win-win workout for all parties, but you have to look at each case individually to see if they actually work. But I like options to purchase. Not all of them pan out, but at least the intentions are well.
Origination fee, a fee a lender charges to a borrower upon making a new loan, intended to cover the administrative costs of making that loan, also called a loan fee.
The lenders will get paid a variety of different ways. Sometimes they'll get money back for processing the loan, but there's a lot of fees involved with getting a loan. So there's points, origination fee, a borrower can expect title and escrow and review fees. So borrowing money isn't cheap. Right now they've redone the rules, so the lenders are going to let you know all of their fees and all of the costs, what it's going to take to borrow the money up front. And the cool thing with the way it works now is that if you were going to talk to a couple of different lenders, they'll get it to you in a sheet, and you can actually kind of compare the sheets and actually see which lender's going to give you a better loan. And the hard part is some of the stuff, they don't really know your whole rate until they look at you. So your credit score could affect your rate or your loan fee or your job that you have or your down payment. So there's a lot of moving factors in that, but the one part of it is an origination fee. So if you see that term, origination fee is a fee that's going to go to your lender to help, grease the tracks to get the loan.
Parcel, a lot or a piece of real estate, especially a specified part of a larger tract.
Kind of like parcel it out, just one little section of property.
Right.
That's one parcel. Might be in the lot or acreage or some of those other types of descriptions, family, but just a piece of land.
Right, but not a package that you mail.
No, that could be too, but real estate, a parcel is the land on which you are standing.
Partial reconveyance, the instrument given to the borrower when part of the security property is released from a blanket deed of trust under a partial release clause.
A partial reconveyance will usually come into play with some type of development property, either with someone building or selling homes or building or selling lots if you've constructed them. So in theory, you take a raw piece of land, you have a loan on everything, you've developed it, and say now the loan is on one piece of property, but there's 20 lots. And so someone comes along and wants to buy one of the 20 lots. Well, the loan's on all of them. There's not enough money to pay the whole loan off. So you get that lender to agree to release the one property, and now that's free and clear of that mortgage. And so title can be transferred to the new buyer, and they have partially released the one property. So they still have their loan in place for the other 19 lots. One of them is released, and this will happen over and over again with either lots or also builders with new construction or condominiums. So it does come into play if you're getting a lot, or usually it's newer construction. Dave, what is pending mean in a real estate contract?
Pending is the in-between period of time after you've had mutual acceptance. So you have a contract, buyer and seller agree to all the terms of that, so it's gone mutual. Pending is the period of time between that and the actual closing date, where basically all the other dots are connected to get to that closing. So it goes from active to pending to closed and recorded. Percolation test. A test to determine the ability of the ground to absorb or drain water, used to determine whether a site is suitable for construction, particularly for the installation of a septic tank system.
And here in the Pacific Northwest, water is a big deal. Whatcom County gets a lot of rain. The whole area gets a decent amount of rain, and we'll have certain areas that will absorb the water faster than other areas. So we have some areas that it's sandy loam or more of a river bottom, and the water just goes zipping right through there. Some of the areas where we'll have more of a clay material, it's more difficult to have water actually go back into earth. And so some of these areas will get wetlands and ponds and stuff. So it's hard to know, just as a Joe consumer, what the property is. And there's going to be rules for your septic system as far as making sure the septic system, if you haven't seen it, it's an on-site sewer system where you have from your house, all of the liquids would go into a tank, and then from that tank it would go into a drain field, and then the liquids would go into the earth. And so it's kind of a big calculation for making sure that if you're going to buy raw land, that the property will support a septic system. And we'll get more into that later on. There's different types of septic systems and different things you can do. But the term percolation test or perk test basically deals with evaluating the soils to see what can happen with it.
And it's sometimes kind of like the first phase. Like if you bought land, you had a feasibility time frame, and there was really not much known on the land, they would do the simplest, easiest thing to do off the bat is do a percolation test just to verify whether or not it's even possible to have a septic tank on.
Right.
Planned unit development, or PUD, a development usually residential with small clustered lots designed to leave more open space than traditional subdivisions have.
And we're starting to see a few more of these. It takes a little bit more work up front to understand the whole project, but it's basically a variation of a subdivision. It's someone's going to take say a raw land or a raw piece of property. Usually it's going to be a bunch of acres, and then come up with their plan on what they want to put in there, houses and or with commercial entities intact. So it's a planned unit development. We're starting to see more of those.
Planning Commission, a local government agency responsible for preparing the community's general plan for development.
You have to have a plan, and it's kind of cool. I love maps, and you'll look at some of the maps of either the city or the county, and they'll separate it. So you won't have residential next to commercial, next to industrial for the most part. So they'll try to put them in zones and come up with areas where they want to see future developments.
Plat, a detailed survey map of a subdivision recorded in the county where the land is located. Subdivided property is sometimes called platted property.
And we'll find this mostly with the title report. Once you start digging into the legal descriptions, they will be put in a plat book, but the county keeps track of each parcel of land in the plat book, and they'll let you know where everything is. The title company has it's pretty cool plat books too. I think as technology is changing, we're starting to see more of this stuff kind of go electronically, but it's something in the past, they would have these big pages, and then if someone made a little change, they would almost like cut and paste and cut, like someone subdivided their property, they would cut and paste and put little lines in there and put it in there. Kind of cool to see the old school plat books, but they are around and they are referred to in the title reports.
Plottage or plottage increment. The increment of a value that results when two or more lots are combined to produce greater value.
There's some property, say you have one parcel, and it's usually going to happen like in development property or multifamily. Say you have one parcel, I'm doing the math in my head, hopefully it makes sense here quick, but they'll have multifamily, there's so many square feet per the first 1,000 square feet for the first unit. So say it's 5,000 square feet for the first unit, and then you get one extra unit per additional 1,000 square feet. So if you have a 6,000 square foot lot, you get the 5,000 plus the 1,000, so that's a 2-unit building, all you can put on there. Well, if you bought the adjacent property and assume it's the same size, now you get more lots. So instead of 2, you're going to get 8, because the other 6,000 you would get 6 units. So now you're going to go with 8 units total versus 2 and 2 of 4. So by having 2 properties together, you've doubled the value of it as far as from a developer standpoint. So it does happen. It's kind of cool when it happens. Sometimes it may happen with a lot somehow. If you're zoned, 2 neighbors get together. If you're zoned 10,000 square feet lots and you have a 15,000 square foot lot and the neighbor has a 15,000 square foot lot, they're stuck right there at one lot. But you put them together, now you may have 3 lots and pull that one extra lot off. So plottage. 0.1% of the principal amount of a loan. I think sometimes it's almost like a lender fee. Usually when I hear point, like how many points to get a loan. So like in hard money, we'll see that a lot where someone will borrow some money. We'll say how many points. So say it's a 3-point loan fee, then it's 3 points. That's how I usually think of points is a percentage associated with borrowing money. And it doesn't mean it goes towards the price. So if say I borrow $100,000 and I'm going to give Dave 2 points. So I give him $2,000 for the right to borrow the $100,000. Sometimes that's tacked onto the loan. You don't have to have points. I think mostly in residential type financing, people aren't paying points. Sometimes you'll pay a point to lower your interest rate. So Dave may give me that loan at say 6% interest with 2 points. But if I pay no points, maybe I'll get it at 7% interest. So it all depends. It's something you'd have to look at how long you're going to want to hold the property and how long it would take you to recover that rate. So that's a simple version of it, but it's regarding financing and a way to deal with the interest rate.
Possession, the holding and enjoyment of property, or the actual physical occupation of real estate.
I guess when I think of possession, normally I think of when a property transfers, when would that buyer be entitled to possession? So say you're buying a income property and there's tenants in place, you would be entitled to possession subject to those tenants. If it's a traditional residential sale and it's owner occupied, usually the buyer would be entitled to possession somewhere near the closing date. Some brokers like to do possession on the date of closing. My preference is that it's shortly thereafter to not put a burden on the seller to have the home all the way vacant only to find out for some reason the sale got delayed or something happened. So I like to make sure that the transaction is done, funded, it's in the buyer's name, and then give the seller a few days and then the buyer can have possession thereafter.
Power of attorney, an instrument authorizing one person, the attorney in fact, to act as another person's agent to the extent stated in the instrument.
And it comes in handy quite a bit. So if Dave and I own a piece of property together and he's out lollygagging around on vacation and we have to close something, we can have a document prepared ahead of time that Dave gives me the authorization to sign on his behalf down the road. And people have a power of attorneys in a lot of situations. In real estate, because it's usually such a big transaction, they're usually limited on time and they have to be notarized to make sure that we know that we're dealing with the right parties. But essentially, any type of a power of attorney or attorney in fact is letting someone else to act on your behalf. So comes in handy quite a bit.
Power of sale clause, a clause in a deed of trust giving the trustee the right to foreclose non-judicially, which is the sale of the debtor's property without a court action if the borrower defaults.
And for the most part, that's how it works in Washington. That's assuming that we're dealing with a promissory note and a deed of trust versus a real estate contract, which is different. So you don't have to go to court. So basically it's a foreclosure action, kind of get into that in some of the other ones, but it's basically the process on when you're going through a foreclosure. So you don't have to go to court. Some of the stuff, which is odd, if you ran away and never came back, someone can take your property and you never went to court, just miss enough payments and it won't be yours anymore. So if someone is throwing these words around with you or if it's coming up, it may not be a good thing. So the way to cure it is just pay the debt off or get it caught up. So it's a foreclosure term. A pre-approval letter is when the lender has actually verified your assets, employment, and actually knows that they can get you the loan. So huge difference in getting pre-approved or pre-qualified. In either case, it's a nice way to start on your real estate purchase so you'll be comfortable knowing that you'll be able to buy what you're looking at. And it also helps the seller understand that if you do make an offer, that you are sincere, interested, and qualified for the purchase.
Keith, what is a pre-qualification letter?
Pre-qualification, and there's two sorts of it, pre-qualification and pre-approval letter. So in both cases, a individual has contacted a lender to obtain financing. The pre-qualification, I say, is the junior or smaller version of that, where they just talked to the lender and gave them some background information on their situation, and the lender said, okay, you're pre-qualified for so much. A pre-approval is when that same lender and same borrower have gone a lot more into detail, and they've actually verified income and assets and employment and credit. So they've gone a lot farther. So they're both important. I think the pre-approval is a lot higher of degree, and that'll give the borrower more assurity that they will be able to purchase. And also, if the borrower wants to use a letter to provide to a potential seller of a property they're interested in, that seller will realize that the buyer has been farther down the process and is more certain that loan will come together and complete their sale.
Pre-approval, a process that allows a prospective borrower to submit a loan application to a lender and get pre-approved for a loan beginning the home buying process.
This is clutch. I would say if you're not sure how much you qualify for or your payments, speaking to a lender is probably right up there with where to start the home buying process. So if someone approaches us, usually, we have the basics on how to pre-qualify someone, but we like to set you up to a lender and they'll go through the pre-approval process and a pre-qualification process. So usually there's two processes. Pre-qualification, which is kind of the smaller version. They're just kind of taking your word at what your income is and expenses and things like that. So it's kind of a thumbnail or a bird's eye view as if a borrower is actually going to qualify. They do the pre-approval, they've actually pulled credit, verified income, assets, all that stuff. And so basically you're ready to go for a loan. It's just making sure locate a house and it appraises. So huge step in starting this process.
Prepayment, paying off part or all of the loan before the payment is due. Prepayment penalty, a penalty charged to a borrower who prepays.
Usually we'll see a prepayment penalty in more of a commercial loan or a private loan. And that's basically that people don't want to get the money back that quick. So let's just say I borrow $100,000 from you. There might be something that you would say, if I was to pay you off within 1 year, I may have a 5% penalty. So now I owe you $5,000. Usually like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the second year I would have $4,000 penalty, third year 3, and so on. That's on commercial loans and a lot of private ones, because sometimes the lenders are private individuals and it's been some work to generate the loan. They don't want to have to go do that again. So there might be a penalty fee in that. On your traditional residential sales, it's just going to be no prepayment penalty. So you can traditionally pay as much as you want. And I would encourage that. So if you get your mortgage statement, you can see how much went towards principal, how much went towards interest. If you make some calculations, just even round up to the next 100 or the next 1,000 and make those payments, you will wipe out that loan a lot quicker, and there's no penalty for that. So suggestion, pay it off as soon as you can.
Prescription, acquiring an interest in real property, usually an easement, by using it openly and without the owner's permission for the period prescribed by statute.
One way of a prescription comes in is it's similar to an easement. Generally, an easement's going to be written, recorded, identified, and state what can happen. A prescription is more of an easement that no one knows about except for you, or you don't have the permission to do it, but you keep on doing it anyways, and you do it long enough, and then all of a sudden it's a problem. And all of a sudden, so if I'm driving over your land that I don't own for 10 years, I'm going to say, no, I've been doing it for 10 years. I get to do this. And so as that goes on, Dave might have to say, oh, you have. Maybe I do now have a right, because after 10 years of doing what I wasn't supposed to do, I now created an actual legal right to that. So anyways, don't call us about those, call the attorneys.
Preventative maintenance, a program of regular inspection and care of a property and its fixtures, allowing the prevention of potential problems or their immediate repair.
And where I see this most is like common sense on a home. And some people take different levels of care of pride of ownership, or how long they'll take care of. We've all seen the homes that people don't take that great a care of. Where I think this comes in, and I think people could put more care in this, is almost like rental properties. And say you have a house and you rent it out, whether you live local or not. You've had a tenant there for a few years and you don't really want to bug them. And I think that's what happens. Some of these homes I've seen where it's kind of a lack of preventative maintenance, or a lack of inspections, or a lack of people really paying attention to it, that these really get deteriorated and start to go down fast. And there's some of these, it's little small items that could really add up. So a small water leak, well, you get it right off the bat, it's not a big deal, but you let that go for 4 years, it's caused mold and damage and all of this other stuff. So preventative maintenance is probably a big issue I could see investor property owners missing out on.
Yeah, one of my favorite things on the preventative maintenance is the people that get ready to sell their house, and then they paint the house, they clean the roof, they clean the gutters, they've lived there for 15, 20 years, and they haven't done these preventative, and then they get ready to sell it and they do it. Instead of if they would have just gradually over time done those preventative maintenance things, they could have actually really enjoyed, because they get to that point, they're like, oh, my house looks fantastic. I don't want to sell it. And it's like, they could have enjoyed all those years by just staying up on the preventative maintenance instead of leaving it to the last hour when they decide to actually sell the house. And then it usually ends up costing more anyway. So.
Right. No, agreed. So if you're putting your money into investing into real estate, take care of it. It's maintenance. You take care of your car. You take care of, your body. You take care of everything. Take care of your real estate too.
Prime rate, the interest rate a bank charges its largest and most desirable customers.
If you're not so desirable, then that might be prime plus whatever. So interest rates go up and down, and that's the hard part of knowing when to either buy or refinance, or what you're going to do with your loan. But the interest rate or the amount you have to pay to borrow it. I think everyone knows simple interest if we haven't, but if I owe Dave $100,000 at 6% interest, that's $6,000 a year. If I pay him $6,000 a year and that's all I pay him, I'm going to continually owe him $6,000 every year, and the $100,000 I still owe him because I haven't made any additional payments. The prime rate can go up and down. So instead of the 6%, it's not usually going to be below that, but it could be, depending on the type of loan, an additional fee associated with the prime rate. And we'll see that with adjustable rate mortgages a lot, where that may be the base, and somewhere down the road, the rate might be prime plus 1.5 or something. And then down the road, the loan would be at 7.5% interest. So we'll hook you up with some great lenders that can explain this better than we can, but it's mostly a financing term when you're borrowing money.
The principle of supply and demand. A principle holding that value varies directly with the demand and inversely with supply. That is, greater the demand and greater the value, and greater the supply, the lower the value.
In our job in real estate, folks will refer to it as what type of market it is. Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market, or kind of an even market? So there's advantages to each different type of market depending if you're going to buy or sell. So if you are a buyer's market's going to mean that there's a lot fewer buyers and a lot more homes. So you're actually in a position to negotiate for a better home. In a seller's market, it's going to mean there's a ton of buyers and not many homes for sale. So when you put your home up for sale, these buyers are competing for your home. So that they will make offers that are more attractive for a variety of reasons, whether it's a higher price or doing a rent back or not worrying about the condition. So you're in a lot better position to negotiate in a seller's market as a seller. You're in a lot better position to negotiate in a buyer's market as a buyer. So it's interesting how the markets change. It can go on interest rates, time of year, type of property. There's a variety of reasons. And it might be like, let's just say a condominium versus a residential house. There might be a difference as far as how fast those are selling, or residential versus commercial versus multifamily. So there are different subgroups within the real estate industry as far as what type of property people are looking for.
Principal residence property, real property that is the owner's home, their main dwelling. Under the federal income tax laws, a person can only have one principal residence at a time.
Your principal residence is taxed different from a rental, so there's a lot of advantages of owning real estate, depreciation, and just a lot of stuff you can do, and appreciation. So it's basically where you live. It's where you hang your hat, where you're registered to vote. That would be your primary home. You can have a vacation home or not, but you will, file your taxes. People will I think, try to come up with where they think tax base wise where a good spot to be. Washington doesn't have currently a state income tax, so we'd welcome you to Bellingham.
Yeah, you can live 6 months in Washington and 6 months in Arizona, but one of the houses has to be your principal residence.
Right.
So.
Principal residence. What is a principal residence? It's where you would spend most of your time. It's generally where you're going to register to vote. And the reason it's important is on financing. So there's a difference if you're going to get a loan on a principal residence or an investment. So a principal residence is going to be the home that you occupy, and classify that as your principal residence. Principal, in regards to a loan, the amount originally borrowed as opposed to the interest. One of the parties to a transaction, such as a buyer or seller, as opposed to those who are involved as agents or employees, such as real estate licensees or escrow agents. So that's something I'd ask someone if they call, and you want to know if you're a principal. So basically, if you're a buyer or seller, you're a principal. Other than that, you're not. So it's nice to know, just identifying yourself as kind of like, I'm a buyer or I'm a seller.
And then I guess, as far as a loan goes, it's just the principal. It's just the beginning balance that you started with.
Right. And those can go up or down. They do have negative interest, loans, and so your principal can go up or down depending on what your payments are. principal.
Private mortgage insurance. Insurance provided by a private company to conventional lenders for loans with loan-to-value ratios over 80%.
So if you put 20% down, you don't have private mortgage insurance. And that's what the banks look at as their threshold for having the lower risk. So people who put less than 20% down, there's a higher risk that the property may come back in foreclosure. So they'd like to make some insurance on it. Unless it's like a VA, a veteran loan, there's not private mortgage insurance on that. And some loans you can go less than 20% down and there's not private mortgage insurance, but just check with your lender.
Yeah, there's different types of loans. Generally, some loans will, once you get past that 20%, once you get to like 22%, they will automatically drop the PMI. Sometimes you have to request, that to be dropped. And different loans, like FHA has their own type of mortgage insurance and VA, et cetera. So yeah, just check out your loan to what the parameters are for some type of mortgage insurance.
Well, that's a great point. So it could be somewhere down the road, you put 5% down and now here you are 5 years later, and instead of having 5% equity, it's gone up in value and done some improvements and you're at 22% equity, then you can petition to have that private mortgage reduced or removed.
Yeah, definitely if you're a homeowner, keep track of it because like I say, some of the lenders will watch it for you, but the insurance companies like that income, so.
Or check with us. If you're not sure the value of your house, we'd be happy to look and help guide you through the process. Private restriction. A restriction imposed on property by a previous owner, a neighbor, or the subdivision developer, a restrictive covenant, or a condition on the deed. So in theory or practically where this may come into play is if someone's going to sell a piece of property and they want to create their own little rule, and you can do that. Here's the rule. I'll sell you this property, but I don't want you to develop it commercially, or I don't want you to ever paint your house yellow, or I don't want to have you put a mobile home on there. We'll see that a lot, where no mobile homes. Or I don't want you to let your trees grow above a certain height. So it's different from a conditions, covenants, and restrictions, which are usually put in by one developer on a whole bunch of properties. This is someone selling a property and just saying this other property can't do X. Right. Commercially, sometimes there might be a use of it. So if I was a big grocery store and I was selling the adjacent property, there might be a rule. Anything can go there but a big grocery store. And that's not for the whole area, for the city, or just like that's part of the rule that as whoever owns the property next door, there'll never be a grocery store because they're not looking for competition. Probate. A judicial proceedings in which the validity of a will is established and the executor is authorized to distribute the estate property, or when there is no valid will in which the administrator is appointed to distribute the estate to the heirs. So probate will kick in after someone passes away and the estate needs to try to figure out where the assets are going to go. A lot of times there's administrators or executors, executrixes that are going to deal with the person's belongings if they have a will. Our best advice would be everyone should have a will. And so especially if you own real estate. If not, it has to go through kind of a whole big legal matter and figure out where the property is going to go or how to be dispersed. And if you have some property or some assets and you want to know where they're going to go ahead, write a will and establish what you want for your future, and that will be set up because we're all going to pass away, so we might as well have a plan ahead of time. And personally, I have a will. I think I feel better at night knowing that my ducks are in a row. What you don't want to do is pass away and create a bunch of headaches for your loved ones.
Promissory note, a written promise to repay a debt. It may or may not be a negotiable instrument.
The majority of the transactions we're involved in that regard financing have some type of a promissory note or there's a promise to pay. So either you pay cash for it and there's no loan involved. If you are borrowing money, there's some type of promise and that's a promissory note. And typically that is referenced in a deed of trust that is actually recorded against the property. So promissory notes, if you were to have a promissory note, that might be you're a seller. that you own the property and you bought it a long time ago, you own it free and clear, you would like to sell it on installments, and the way we put that together, the instrument that secures that, you say sell it to a buyer who puts 25% down. The balance, or the 75% that they're going to owe you, is going to be on a promissory note, and you will be protected with the deed of trust that's recorded against the property. So promissory notes are a huge part of what we do, because the majority of the sales we're involved with have some type of financing. Not all of them, but many do.
Can you sell those promissory notes?
Yeah, if you own a promissory note, you will start to get all kinds of mail from promissory note buyers. I would just start a file on that and just save them, just because there may be at some point you want to sell them. But people will say you have a $100,000 promissory note, and there's different factors depending on what someone will pay for it. How long it's seasoned, is it like 1 month old or is it 3 years old? What's the interest rate? What's the maturity date? What's the equity in it? Is it commercial? Is it residential? What's the payments? There's a variety of things, but for the most part, you have a $100,000 note. Someone may use the term give you a discount and actually purchase that from you. So it's a whole industry. It's a big industry. If you're in a position where you have a promissory note and you're curious about it, ask us and we can help hopefully guide you in some right directions there.
Property manager, a person hired by a property owner to administer, merchandise, and maintain the property, especially rental property. Property management agreement, a document that creates an agency relationship between a property owner and the property manager and establishes the terms and conditions of the relationship.
Property management is a challenging and difficult, however extremely important job in real estate. So if you're a property owner and you're out of the area, or you don't want to put the energy or resources into taking care of your property yourself, you hire a third party. They are real estate brokers, and some of them have bigger teams and maintenance departments, but essentially they're going to act as your behalf. So they will advertise the property, show the property, sign lease agreements with the tenants, and deal with vacancies. But they're kind of stuck in the middle, because the tenants may really want a new fridge, and the owners may really don't want to spend the money on a fridge. So the manager kind of gets it from both ends, and not that they're overworked, but there's a lot of work for them to do, and maintenance and repairs. And if you just think of the whole gamut of just people, you'll have a lot of different property owners, a lot of different types of tenants. These managers are in there doing the best they can to help everyone out. So it's a tough job. There's a lot of reporting, maintenance, and just rules and regulations that they have to abide by for both the tenant and the owner. So it's an essential part of I guess, life, because if you don't own a home, you'll be a tenant, and if you're a tenant, a lot of these properties are managed by a property manager. And some managers have in-house, so you might have a 100-unit apartment building, and that's going to be almost like a staff on-site property managers. It's one person for that whole building, versus the smaller buildings. If you're in a 4-unit, that one property manager may manage 50 4-unit buildings, but they're all over town, but you'll go to their one property manager's office. So essential aspect of real estate is dealing with property managers.
Yeah, property managers generally get paid a fee for what they do. I guess it would be, unlike everything else, is shop around, because depending on what you want done with a property management company, you may be able to pick and choose what you want them to take care of. So maybe you want to still maintain some of the upkeep on the property for tax purposes. Maybe you being involved has some advantages, so you want to be a little bit more hands-on, or maybe you want to be hands-off, so you want a full-service property management company. So there is some different, number one, the fees are involved differently, and some property management companies will allow you to have some hands-on access and some may not. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, different levels of service, like sometimes it might just be placing a tenant only, or like you're referencing the maintenance. If your nephew mows lawns and you want him to be part of the program, might deal with some of the payments. They will make a lot of the payments for you, so they'll pay your utilities, water, sewer, garbage, maintenance, they can make the mortgage payment, they can set a lot of this stuff up electronically and help you. Nice thing is that they've got it all out on report, so if you want to go at the end of the year to see how the property did, they have to keep good records. So, I mean, it really, really is a big part of what we do in real estate is dealing with property managers.
Proration, the process of dividing or allocating something, especially a sum of money or an expense, proportionately according to time, interest, or benefits.
We see this all the time. On every transaction, we have a proration. And we actually had to pass the test to become brokers, so we know this. But basically, say someone has property taxes for the full year, and they paid the full year, and you closed on day 120 of the year, that other person may have to give you a credit back for the remainder of 245 days for the year. Or if it's during the month and you close on the 10th day of the month and there was so much water, what's your first 10 days of water versus the last 20? And that's prorated. So usually where we'll see these prorations is with escrow or the settlement company who will figure all this fun math stuff out and prorate it. So the buyer pays their fair share, the seller pays their fair share, and it's about as fair as what we can put it together. So the process of equaling everything up is prorations.
Public offering statement, a statement required by the Washington Land Development Act that provides detailed information about the subdivision, such as whether there are any liens, the physical condition of the land, compliance with land use laws, and so on.
The public offering statement is mostly going to be used if there's like some type of a homeowners association and it's the initial coming out the gate financial analysis of what a property may have. So in a condominium, there's one public offering statement. That's the first time it's offered. And that gives the developers understanding of what the dues are going to be and allocations. The subsequent sales, the buyer would receive a resale certificate. So it's similar, the same type of information, but it's updated on the annual basis or as life goes on. But the public offering statement would be a new construction or new development, maybe land, and there's dues that are associated with owning the raw lot. Like we have Sudden Valley here that has a ton of amenities and the lots are required to pay dues. So when these initially came out years and years ago, it was a public offering statement, and subsequently it's more of a resale certificate or more on condominiums. We're not required to do the resale certificates for land.
Purchase and sale agreement, a contract in which a seller promises to convey title to real property to a buyer in exchange for the purchase price, also called an earnest money agreement, deposit receipt, sales contract, or a contract of sale.
I'll also throw in escrow instructions, because it's basically a meeting of the minds between a buyer and a seller to purchase a particular piece of property. There may be terms as far as a closing date or the price or contingencies we have and the process of purchasing it. So it's a written understanding of what our agreement is, and ultimately we need to give that to a third party to follow through with what our wishes are, and that would be the escrow company. And so escrow has to follow the price, the closing date, they have to follow all of the instructions. So that's how I'll consider it a lot of times. So and a lot of times we're putting little notes in there to escrow, like, all right, the seller's going to pay $2,000 of the buyer's closing costs. Well, that's an instruction to escrow. But that's our favorite part of the job, is when we get these purchase and sale agreements wrapped around, because that's when we're successful in doing our jobs and helping people, is when we're helping people figure the contracts out.
Yeah, and you'll see the multiple definitions because it depends on what part of the states that you're in, or maybe you have an attorney drafting it up. They're not going to call it necessarily a purchase sale agreement. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's many, depending on where you're at and what process you're using, you're going to see different terms